Our video session today aims to prepare both teachers and students for the kinds of rehearsals that will likely be a part of music instruction in this coming school year. While these techniques are particularly useful for the immediate need to have more small group rehearsals due to the restrictions of number of students allowed to meet in a classroom, we know they can also be of use whenever there's a desire for more independent learning in the rehearsal process. This video will focus on techniques that students can use directly without the need for instructional information from the teacher conductor. While careful planning is important for the success of any rehearsal, these basic skills are independent of any lesson plan. Let's start with some ways to use visual signals to help in keeping the group together without the use of a conductor. There's still the need to select a leader in the group, but any of these techniques can be practiced by all students as to be able to rotate leaders throughout the semester. Visual signals will be highly important so as to minimize the need to speak during the rehearsals. Remember, music is a nonverbal art. So how do we get the group started together? The leader can and should, in the initial few rehearsals, establish the tempo and entrance by counting off. However, after the group understands how fast the selection goes, counting off is unnecessary. Let's look at how to get started visually, how to stop, and how to mark measures or rehearsal numbers. The basic process for getting underway is to simply make sure that everyone is looking at the leader as they bring their instruments up together. Then the leader uses a sideways motion with the instrument to signal ready, an upward motion to signal set or breathe, and then downward in time to signal play. Let's see how that would look for each of the instruments. Each of our players will demonstrate twice, so you can practice with them the second time. Now, some of the instruments might be better off not moving around too much. And if a player can use a free hand that's not required to play, such as on a tuba, it may work to have that person just use their free hand instead. So now that we're started, how do we end together? Lots of music will finish just fine without the need of any kind of visual signal, but if there are times when the duration needs to be confirmed, then a simple circle motion or moving your instrument up and down will work just fine. Let's see what that looks like with a couple of our players. Staying together without a conductor is one of the biggest challenges in small group rehearsals. But a visual signal here, too, will get the trick. Simply by having all the players move together on the downbeat of every measure will ensure that no one gets lost. This technique won't be necessary after the first few rehearsals when everyone's becoming more familiar with the music. Another option is to visually show where each of the rehearsal markings, either the letters or the numbers, occurs. This is very helpful for those who are not playing and have some rest to count. Of course, one of the most useful ways to keep everyone together while rehearsing is using a metronome. This can be left on while rehearsing a section that doesn't change tempo and is particularly useful when practicing a section over and over to increase accuracy. There are many ways to practice using a metronome, although it's more difficult to know what to do when faced with players playing different parts. Here's some other ways to rehearse using a metronome. Bopping is something that works very well, and here everyone plays whatever's in their part, but short and distinctly. And now the metronome continues, and we will have the group clap their rhythm without instruments. You can also designate a human metronome for these exercises. One of the players simply lays out and claps a steady pulse with or without a subdivision to help in keeping with the timing. It may be better at times to have the metronome set to sound the subdivision instead of the main pulse. Hearing the subdivision can help everyone place their notes more carefully, especially in slow tempos. Speaking of helpers within the group, another job that can be assigned is the designated listener. This person simply listens while the other players rehearse and comments on what they hear in regard to what's being worked on. Working as a team is crucially important in a small group, and if everyone takes responsibility for their own job, the results can be amazing. Here, Gabby is the leader, Katie Ann the designated listener, Kayla is our metronome, and Caroline is working to match articulation style with Gabby. The comments of the designated listener should always be given in a constructive fashion based on the phrase, "What I heard was," followed by a comparison to the objective being worked on.
was the quarter notes being a little bit shorter than the quarter notes that Gabby was playing.
Why this is so important is that it is often difficult to hear exactly what the audience hears when you're playing. A designated listener within the group acts the same as would the audience. Here's another way to use a designated listener. The proper balance in volume or dynamic can be really hard to gauge when playing together. So the designated listener can help by moving at a distance from the group to see if certain parts are coming out too loud or too soft.
Something that I heard was, Jimmy, I think you were a little bit too loud, and Caroline, I think you were a little bit too soft.
So the great thing about this process for balance is that when the designated listener rejoins the group, they're very aware of how the music sounded without them, so now they can simply add their part for proper balance. So this concludes our first video, which focused on some ideas about how to keep the group together without a conductor. Communication is the key to successful ensemble playing, and while it is important to know how to share the ideas verbally, the art of music demands that we learn to also do this non-verbally.